podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Look, my day job as a firefighter is tough, but my night job as a social media manager, my Persian cat Jinxie, that's intense. It's 8 p.m., I've finally gotten home from another 24-hour shift, and I just want to kick back with a cold one, but old Jinxie knocks my beer right off the counter and gives me that look that says, no drinking on the clock. But Heineken 0.0 keeps us both happy. Zero alcohol, but just as refreshing. So I get my drink, and I can still work on Jinxie's new line of merch.
Heineken 0.0, 0.0% alcohol. Now you can. Must be 21 plus to purchase. Enjoy responsibly.
Good evening. Live from New York, it's the Love Tennis Podcast, as they definitely don't say on one famous American TV show. Welcome back. Thank you very much for coming back and listening. Welcome to the first US Open podcast. I am here in New York. George Belshaw is in Birmingham. Calvin Betton is in Barnsley. There cannot be three more glamorous locations from which to podcast. I'm going to start with an apology, which is that because of the transatlantic nature and the cheap nature of my hotel, this podcast may be something of satellite delay. I'll do my best to fix it in post, and we will do our best to deal with it, but we will just have to cope, I'm afraid. So apologies in advance. Hopefully it won't happen too often. We've obviously got loads to talk about. We're recording this on Friday morning US time, Friday afternoon over in the UK. The draw came out yesterday, just as I was landing on American tarmac, pretty much. They announced that Novak would not be playing and that the draw was out. We'll go through the men's and the women's. We'll talk a bit about who's done well out of it, who's done poorly out of it. We'll have a look at the fantasy tennis implications as well, and we'll also go through Forbes' list of highest paid tennis players, which has got a couple of interesting figures on it as well, courtesy of Jose Morgado on Twitter, the ever followable and very useful, well, one of the members of the 100k club. I can't tell you who the other members are because it would be potentially incriminating, but they call themselves that, I believe. Let's start with the news that broke yesterday, which I don't think surprised any of us, but was at least news, that Novak Djokovic would not be travelling to the USA for the US Open. He revealed about half an hour before the draw came out, or was made, I should say, that he would not be travelling. He said, I will not be able to travel to New York this time for the US Open. Thank you, #NoLayFam, for your messages and love and support. Good luck to my fellow players. I'll keep in good shape and positive spirit and wait for an opportunity to compete again. See you soon, tennis world. George, did you ever realistically think that Novak would be coming to New York?
Not really. I mean, there seemed like there was a brief glimmer of hope with a few kind of regulations changing in the States. I mean, I wouldn't say I sympathise with him over this, because ultimately this is his choice not to get the jab in the first place. But he's somewhat unfortunate in terms of various laxing of rules around the world that he's been caught in this moment here, and it is just a bit bizarre, isn't it? I suppose in some ways that he was able to compete in 2021 there, but can't now, and nothing's really changed from his side. It's just kind of the way of the world, I suppose. And I wouldn't want to try and second guess US laws going forwards, but it wouldn't surprise me that much if he's allowed straight in 2023, or possibly would be allowed in later this year. So yeah, this sympathy won't flow from me greatly, but he is also, trapped in a strange world we're in terms of legislation on this now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have said, oh, it's another Grand Slam that Novak's not going to get points for, out with his control. Now, he's obviously not going to get points from 3 Grand Slams this year. The Wimbledon one was really out with his control, but I'm afraid that the other 2 are within his control. I know that will be somewhat controversial for some people, but that's the reality of it. Every single other player managed it, and he didn't. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some absolutely batshit theories on Twitter about the Moderna sponsoring the US Open, the vaccine, and that being why. But the US Open are just following the US government's regulations.
Yes, that should be pointed out as well, that everyone's like, oh, the USTA have banned Novak. The USTA have got nothing to do with it. Sure, they could have lobbied government harder, I'm sure, and I've no idea how hard they did lobby or didn't lobby government. But the reality is that this is a decision that comes from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in the US. And yeah, there isn't really anything the USTA could do about it. I hope that you're getting, by the way, the really authentic like New York traffic noises from my cheap Midtown hotel. Like that, I'm getting like the sirens and the hooting and I'm walking here, which I hope come across on the audio. Anyway, so no Novak in the draw. I mean, George, the controversial thing was that he pulled out before the draw, which is good, and credit where credit's due. He would have been to an extent within his rights to cling on. I mean, even until Monday, he could have asked for a Tuesday start, and he could have said, "Oh, I think the regulations are going to change on Monday, and I'll just get the private jet over on Monday afternoon and play Tuesday," which obviously would have created a lucky loser hanging around for 4 days and then replacing him were he not able to come. So I suppose we should give him some credit for doing that. But could he have pulled out before the qualifying draw as well? Because then, instead of having a lucky loser spot, everyone just would have shunted up. And you would have had, I think it was Pol, is that right? I'm just checking who Pol Martin Tiffon was the first alternate into qualifying who ended up obviously not playing at all. Is it unfair to ask him to pull out a week before rather than 4 days before?
I mean, I can see kind of both sides on it. In Novak's defence, there was enough movement in the US on this policy that it suggested it could potentially come to his aid if there was some very quick decisions made. So I understand him hanging on to this point. I do also get the point about qualifiers. I know Liam Brody kind of was making the call to this, and he said it wasn't about Novak and was more about players who know they're injured. I mean, we've seen Katie Boulter do this in the past at the French Open, for example, where she pulled out after the French Open draw had been made, essentially to pocket some money, which I also, given the state of tennis, I don't necessarily blame players like Katie Boulter for doing that, because at the end of the day, qualifying for the slams, this is such a huge portion of their prize money of the year that actually the ranking itself is almost like your payment in some ways. So I don't really begrudge them doing that. That's not going to be the case for someone like Novak, who's got more money than you can imagine, whatever 20 grand he would have got from splitting the first round prize money wouldn't really benefit him that greatly. But it's a problem in tennis's ecosystem as a whole, that these are the money at these events is so much bigger proportionally than other events, that it creates this problem. Why the hell would you pull out if you're one of the players in those spots, particularly not one of the very top guys? Like, this is a massive chunk of your yearly earnings.
Is there an argument, and I don't know if this argument has ever been made before, but is there an argument that the Grand Slams should be turning themselves not into loss-making ventures, but basically taking some of the money out of their own prize pool and sticking it into more prize pools, like in the run-up events, in order to sort of seed the ground a bit more?
Yeah, they 100% should be doing that. It's so, you don't need, for example, like the winner of a Grand Slam doesn't need to get, what is it now, £2.5 million.
Yeah.
Like, and even like if you ask the players, they would rather have a bit more in the other tournaments than even the first rounders, like 60 grand in the first rounders. It doesn't weigh up, because then too much goes on one tournament. If you're injured if you're say you're a guy who's ranked, say, a 100-ish, and you're injured, you miss one of the slams, that's 60 grand out of your overall money, whereas you'd rather be getting it more regularly. Yeah,
it seems sort of overly top heavy. And I think, this is one of those sliding scale arguments where it's just where you want the sort of pinch point to be. But as you say, Calvin, if you're someone who plays and loses every first round of a slam, that's what, £200,000? I imagine if you're 9,500 in the world, that's a pretty big chunk of money, right?
Yeah, but also I think it's not even difficult to solve. I'm not talking about taking huge amounts of money out of the slams. You're taking, if you took £250,000 out of each of the slams' total prize pool, and you'd find another £1 million to go into the rest of the circuit, and that's on both men's and women's. So, so £500,000 from each. You'd solve the ecosystem entirely.
Yeah. It would also have a far bigger impact on the women's circuit, where prize money is objectively lower, and on a regular basis you have tournaments where the women and the men run alongside each other, and the women are getting paid half what the men are getting paid, or even greater orders of magnitude. I found it funny, Liam Brody tweeting about it. He said there should be a rule against late withdrawals from slams when you know you aren't going to play. Really tough on number one seeds in slam qualifying, seeing players they know aren't playing on the main draw list but still have to go through qualifying. He said it wasn't about Novak, although obviously that's partly what triggered the conversation, and he has now spent, I think, the last week just dealing with
bots.
extreme trolling, for want of a better word. But I've just seen the outfit that he's been wearing for US Open qualifying, and I'm thinking that maybe he deserves it. So I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to the draw, in which Novak was not. I think he was down to be the number 6 seed. He would have been. So his removal shunted everyone up. It also meant it favoured another Serb, funnily enough, because it means Majomir Kecmanovic is a number 32 seed rather than being what frankly would have been quite a dangerous floater. Just to kind of run you through the headlines, or at least what I thought were the picks of the draw. Nick Kyrgios drawn against his great friend Thanasi Kokkinakis. Carlos Alcaraz against Sebastian Baez, looks like a good first rounder. Pablo Carreño Busta against Dominic Thiem. Tommy Paul against Bernabe Zapata Morales, I think might be the sort of low-key entertaining match of the round, basically because Zapata Morales is always good to watch. And Oscar Otter up against Hubert Hurkacz, also quite a good-looking first-round tie. I thought we might try and run through the draw kind of section by section. Let's start at the top of the men's draw with the world number 1 and top seed Daniil Medvedev, who is of course defending his title, a Grand Slam title for the very first time he is defending. He's picked up Stefan Kozlov, the American, in the first round. The other seeds in his section are Nicolas Basilashvili, his slated third-round opponent, and then the fourth round he could either get Kyrgios or Bautista Agut if things go to form. George, I would say that Kyrgios in the fourth round is not a great draw for Medvedev.
No, I mean, obviously Nick beat him a couple of weeks ago, and Nick's having a very good year. I still would back Medvedev over 5 sets on a hard court against Kyrgios. I think he would. Yeah, I think he would find a way through in that format. But Kyrgios is full of confidence. Weirdly, I think Bautista Agut is a bit of a nightmare for Kyrgios as well. That's the sort of last sort of player he wants as a seed kicking around. It's that sort of match where he has the complete brain meltdowns, because it's like, oh, for God's sake, this bloke just keeps getting in the bloody court, and I'm going to lose my head because I should be beating this guy because he's got nothing about him, and yet he's still making me play that extra shot, and I'm bored, and screw this guy and shut up crowd and whatever. That's kind of, that feels like a risky round for a potential match for him. But yeah, I mean, look, Medvedev, Kyrgios fourth round, would be all here for it. That would be a cracking way to kickstart the second week.
Calvin, Kyrgios Kokkinakis in the first round. I mean, how do you think that works? I mean, I know getting inside Nick's head is probably quite a weird place to be, but to get his best mate in the first round of the Australian Open, do you think it might kickstart his campaign a bit?
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that works, because when he plays the lads who he gets on with, they seem to not want to upset him, and it's all a bit chummy and a bit silly, I think, when that's happened before, because they know let's be honest, he can be quite a nasty so-and-so, Nick Kyrgios, towards other players. And I think especially when he's playing and afterwards in the press conference, and I think that his mates tend to not want to see that side of him. So it's always a bit of a weird atmosphere, without naming names of his other mates who behave like that when they play him. So I think it'd just be a strange match. Kyrgios will win it.
I do think he also misbehaves. His misbehaviour is levelled depending on who he's playing. Like, I think if he has respect for the person on the other side of the net, he misbehaves less. Like, even the Wimbledon final, if you actually think about it, like, in the sort of, the Hall of Fame of Nick Kyrgios performances, and I mean sort of antics, the Wimbledon final actually wasn't that bad compared to what it could have been, because I think he respects Djokovic. Whereas I think when he gets on court with someone who he really doesn't like or doesn't respect, then I think you see much more of his behaviour. So I think you're probably right. I think it will be a slightly odd atmosphere. But he posted on Instagram saying, "Let's put on a show, buddy." I think it will be good to watch. I mean, of course it'll be good to watch. They're two very good to watch players, aren't they?
Yeah. I was going to say, the other player who is probably worth a brief mention in this section is young Ben Shelton, who was quite impressive during his debut at tour level. And I think I'm right in saying he's just turned pro before this tournament. So he's facing a qualifier or lucky loser round one. So that'll be a good one for the home nation to get behind.
Am I right in saying that he won the wildcard challenge to win? Or is it because he won the college? I know he's the NCAA singles champion in college. I'm not sure if that's how he got his wildcard or whether he won the wildcard challenge. I'm not quite sure. I think because it was complicated. I'll tell you what it was. It was complicated because JJ Wolf won the wildcard challenge, but then after a couple of withdrawals, JJ Wolf got in on direct entry, I think. So it just made things a little bit more complicated. So I think he was a runner-up in the wildcard challenge. Anyway, yes, you're right, George. One to watch, Ben Shelton. He could get Basilashvili in the second round, which, you can imagine that being on one of the more fun courts, like on Grandstand or something, and with a decent crowd behind him. That'd be a good watch. Let's move on to section 2 quickly. There are a few good matches in here. Bublik Gaston looks like a bit of a low-key entertaining one. Carreño Busta Team is obviously a dreadful draw for Team. I don't think we need to say much more about that. But it would be worth talking about Jack Draper against Emil Ruusuvuori in the first round. The winner of that plays more than likely Felix Auger-Aliassime. Ruusuvuori obviously beat Draper at Queen's this year.
Pretty comfortably.
I think, and Calvin may disagree with this, but Ruusuvuori hits it reasonably flat and reasonably big, which seems to be quite a poor matchup for Jack. Calvin. That certainly, I had someone say that to me and it made some sense.
Jack would rather play somebody who he can tee off against for sure, but knowing Jack as I do, I don't think he'll be worried about playing Ruusuvuori. But Ruusuvuori is a very good player. I think he'll be top. I certainly think he'll end up being top 20 in the world. He might even get a sniff at top 10. He's very good. So I think that'd be it's a good match. I think it'd be a close match.
How much do you think going deep last week or producing a couple of pretty big performances over the last week? He got to the quarterfinals in Winston-Salem. He got to the quarterfinals in Canada as well. Jack strikes me as someone who does want some wins under his belt. Obviously you'd always want wins under their belt, but the balance between physicality and confidence and match sharpness is a difficult one to strike for someone like Jack, isn't it?
Yeah, but I also think it's just about knowing that you're of that level, and just every time you win, it sort of just puts another coin in that bank, I suppose. Every time, and he's at the age where every win at a tour level is still a good win. Because it just puts more in the bank, and as I've said before, Jack's mentality will never be an issue. He's a competitor. The only issue which he's still, I suppose, left to confirm that he's over is the physical part of things. Whether he can stay injury free and that kind of thing for a sustained period in order to drive himself into the top 20 and the top 10.
Would you give him much of a chance if he did come past Ruusuvuori against Auger-Aliassime?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that's a given by any stretch. And I think, again, what's most important, the most important aspect about this is that Jack will give himself a good shot against Auger-Aliassime. They'll know each other. I'm sure they'll have played each other in juniors. Although Felix was absolutely dominant in juniors, as I've said before. So I don't know how that would have gone. But yeah, Jack will certainly favour himself. And that is a decent matchup for Jack, as it happens. Auger-Aliassime is not a great returner. Jack's got a big serve. He is a bit frail mentally, is Felix, and Jack isn't. So,
yeah, an interesting little section. Whoever comes out of that will have earned it, and they will pick up, we think, Daniil Medvedev in the quarter-final. Moving on to section 3, where we find Stefanos Tsitsipas, the number 4 seed. I've got this down as a bit of a stinker for Stefanos Tsitsipas to be in this section, because he's slated to get Maxime Cressy potentially in the 3rd round, and then perhaps Matteo Berrettini in the 4th round, or even Andy Murray, heaven forbid, who's in there against Francisco Cerundolo, the Argentinian, in the opening round. George, do you agree with that assessment? Not a great draw for Tsitsipas?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, Cressy is an awkward player, but he beat him pretty well last time they met in the US Open. I suppose Cressy's come on since then, so, and Tsitsipas has perhaps stalled since then. Berrettini's a bit of a funny one at the minute. I think if you'd have asked me a month ago, I'd back Berrettini fairly comfortably in that match, but he's slightly stalled a little bit on the USR court, so that feels quite even. That'd be a pretty good 4th round match if we do that. From Murray's perspective, I think he's got to fancy his chances against Cerundolo. That's a pretty good seed draw, I would say, for him. That's a good opportunity to win and take over a seeds draw. And then you look, John Millman, round 2. Millman's not what he was. And, Berrettini's not in perfect form, so that's a potential opportunity then. But, yeah, it's an interesting section, that's for sure. And, you haven't mentioned Davidovich Fokina and Fuchsovix as well. They're guys you don't really want to meet early on in the slam either, who are floating in there. So wouldn't surprise me if there are a few shocks in that little bit, to be honest.
Cerundolo, obviously a bit of a rising star of the tour, albeit that he is 24, but something of a late bloomer. I mean, Calvin, I've been hearing some things about Andy Murray and trying to work out why he's been doing all this cramping. I mean, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I was having dinner with someone last night, and I suggested, and there didn't get much disagreement, that to be cramping this many times in this many matches, even in a North American hardcourt swing, it's a bit of a concern, isn't it? It's not like Murray's not fit enough.
Yeah, the cramp's a strange one, though. It's difficult to pinpoint because there are certain times where, you only have to look at footballers and they cramp. Yeah. And you'd think they play 90 minutes every week. Why are they cramping sometimes? Which makes me wonder, and this has always been a sort of theory of mine, I've no evidence to back it up, is that pressure does play a part in it. If you're putting pressure on yourself, then I think that must play some sort of part in cramping. Maybe your muscles get tenser or something, I don't know. But it's difficult to tell why a person is cramping. It won't be his age. There's people, Novak Djokovic doesn't cramp, Nadal doesn't cramp. And as you say, it's not a lack of fitness, which makes me wonder whether it is just, that he's putting pressure on himself. He's feeling the pressure of it.
Yeah, I do wonder whether it's not remotely in his nature, and I don't think he would ever be able to do it. But I do wonder what Andy Murray would look like if he came out and said, "You know what, this is a freebie," and I'm not putting lots of pressure on himself. But I don't think I've ever heard him talk about tennis in that way ever. So I don't think he could do it. But you do wonder if that would change things and whether it would allow him to play that game style that we've said he needs to.
He's not got a bad draw. It's quite a good draw, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of, he's got Cerundolo, hasn't he? He plays the winner of
Millman Nava.
Yeah, I expect he'll win both of those. What's paramount importance is he can't be getting dragged into 5-set matches in those.
100%.
He just can't. If he doesn't, say he goes through in a straight and a 4, either or, I think he might fancy playing Berrettini. If it is Berrettini. Yeah. Berrettini's not in any sort of form.
No.
There's just no way he's going through the first 2 in straights.
But he should, though, George. I agree. I know what you're saying. I agree, but he should do. If you look at on it, he should be able to beat those three opponents, whichever one it is, in straight sets. There's no question. He's one of the top 20 players of all time.
Yeah.
And they're not in the top 20,000 players of all time.
I'd like to do the maths on that, but I don't think I've got the time. And we certainly don't have the time. Let's move into section 4, the bottom of the top, I should say. All of these matches, by the way, will be on Monday. This is the top half of the men's draw, which is going to go on Monday's order of play, whenever that comes out tomorrow, we think. This section's got, I think, 5 qualifiers in it and 3 protected rankings, which officially makes it the most open section of the draw. The seeded players are Taylor Fritz, Casper Ruud, Tommy Paul and Botic van der Zandschulp. The significant names in there as well. And incidentally, those lucky losers and protected rankings don't even include Sebastian Korda and Tim van Richthoven, both of whom are, I would suggest, unseeded floaters. Overall, it's an absolute sort of just crackdown of a draw, to be quite frank.
Crash, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fantasy-wise, who on earth would you pick?
Well, because you definitely want to pick someone, but you just don't know who. I would be tempted by Casper Ruud. I mean, look, obviously Kyle Edmund's a great story, and I'm going to be talking to him later on today, and it's brilliant to see him back in the main draw of a Grand Slam in the singles for the first time, I think, in 3 years, and he's been on a very, very long road to get back here, but drawing Casper Ruud in the first round is an absolute stinker, isn't it, George?
It is, yeah, and I don't really see Kyle having much of a hope, to be honest. I think that'll be too big a step for him, but I hope I'm wrong, because Kyle, on the top of his game, could certainly give Ruud a good match, and I'd back him to have very good chances of winning that match. But yeah, he's not quite there at the minute, as you say. You'd expect Ruud to come through that. I mean, as much as I'm saying this is open, I still would probably just be picking Ruud and Fritz to be the 4th round here. I think both those guys have had good years. They seem in fairly decent nick, decent form. I still think they're probably the favourites, but they're certainly not such clear favourites that you wouldn't bet against another cheeky Botic run or big Tim Van Aar.
TVR. Don't write off Tommy Paul. Someone tweeted us the other week saying, great to hear a mention of Tommy Paul on the podcast, if only for about 10 seconds. But he is having a good year, and he is a player who can play. We've seen that on various different surfaces. His hero is Tim Henman, which I think is a fine choice. Albeit an unusual one for an American. The only problem really is he wears his hat backwards, and I know there are a lot of them now, but I think we should still call this kind of thing out whenever we see it. It's not right. These hats are not built for this. You should wear them the right way around.
I was actually wondering the other day that what is the age where wearing a cap backwards it's just ridiculous.
It's got to be like
I think
24?
there must be an age where it comes. Yeah, I'd agree on that. It's early to mid 20s, I think. You see a lot of sort of 19, 20-year-olds and they do it, but there has to come a point where, like, no, this is ludicrous now. Yeah,
move on, get a job. Let's move on to the bottom half of the men's draw. We've got to pick up the pace here. We're lagging behind the schedule. Section 5 has Hubert Hurkacz in it and Yannick Sinner, which would be a really nice 4th round match, actually, I would suggest, between those two. Those trying to put a fly in the ointment include Grigor Dimitrov, Lorenzo Musetti, although I'm not expecting a huge amount from him at the moment. Not many other names, to be quite frank. I mean, Martinez, Steve Johnson, Adrian Manarino, Sam Querrey, all guys you're not expecting to get past round 2 at the very best. Talk to me about that Hurkacz-Sinner matchup, Calvin. It feels, I can't quite work it out. I mean, they're sort of two guys at quite similar points of their career.
Yeah, kind of got a real feeling of a sort of, Masters Series quarter-final vibe to it, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of Indian Wells quarter-final.
Yeah.
You don't expect to see that kind of match. But, they're both good players. I think they're both players who will be around the top 10 in the world for at least the next 5 or 6 years. So I think they'll end up playing each other a lot, I would think. I'd favour Sinner. Hurkacz doesn't seem on the best of form.
My question mark with Sinner is the guys that he's lost to this summer, and I know it's like quite a limited sort of sample size, but since Wimbledon, Pablo Carreño Busta and Felix Auger-Aliassime, and he hasn't really played anyone else in the top 20, and he's lost all those matches, and it just makes me think that this plateauing that we've talked about with Jannik Sinner before, it just feels like he is rubbing up or banging up against a kind of wall, and I don't know. I know he's working with Darren Cahill now, so things will be changing, I'm sure. But it just feels like there's a wall here that he needs to get over.
I was actually going to say, similar to you there, James, that he's had a weird summer actually, in that he's not been in great form, but he's beaten the guy who we think is probably the third favourite for the tournament three times. Yeah, so if you're doing that, then you can say you are in great form, but then you look at the rest of his results and you think it's actually not in great form.
But maybe, and this brings us on quite nicely to the next section of the draw, which includes Carlos Alcaraz. Maybe we just need to cool our jets on Carlos Alcaraz a bit, because there has been a bit of what statisticians call mean reversion, which is where he had this unbelievable run of form, but yes, he made the final in Croatia, which is where Sinner beat him, but he's lost to Tommy Paul, he's lost to Cam Norrie, he lost to Lorenzo Musetti in Germany, he obviously lost to Sinner at Wimbledon as well. That for all that we were really impressed when he went and won all those big matches in the clay court season, we have to then say, well, hang on, he's also lost quite a lot of quite winnable matches. He's spoken specifically about dealing with the pressure, I think, in Canada. Do we not have to say that Carlos Alcaraz isn't the third favourite for this tournament now, Calvin?
No, I think he probably still is. I'd struggle to see who would beat him. You could say Tsitsipas maybe, but he beat Tsitsipas here last year, and he's a better player than he was back then. Yeah, he's had a couple of losses, but I think the Spaniards know how to peak. We'll leave it at that.
Great. That's a hell of an allegation.
Yeah. He's got a great draw, Alcaraz, to be honest. I know like Baez isn't necessarily the easiest first round, but that's a pretty dream section he's in. I think he'll probably meet Sinner quarterfinals. I'm pretty sure I'll be picking Sinner from that bracket for fantasy-wise. I quite like his draw as well, but I think Sinner will beat him. I do. I think he's got his number this summer, and I think Sinner's the more likely to get to the semi-finals of those two. I don't think I see Sinner winning the tournament per se, but I think he can bring an end to Alcaraz, which, in terms of his Grand Slam year, a couple of quarterfinals is, I suppose, progress. But, this feels like he's lacked that really great slam, doesn't it, this year, maybe?
His section, incidentally, is Borna Coric in round 3, and then either Dan Evans or Marin Cilic in round 4, which I think Alcaraz probably fancy quite a lot. Let's move on to section 7 of the men's draw. We've got 3 minutes to do the bottom 2 sections. Cam Norrie, Holger Rune, Denis Shapovalov and Andrei Rublev. Pick one of those, George.
I fancy Norrie, to be honest. Rublev's a bit out of form. Denis has been pretty awful all year. Holger Rune is a good player. You never quite know what you're going to get, but still there. So yeah, I think Norrie will be consistent. He'll go to the quarters. Would be my pick.
Which incidentally would be pretty massive for his ranking, because he is defending no points from last year because he lost first round here last year. So if he can make the quarterfinals, it'll pop him up maybe as far as 7th in the world. Obviously Novak's losing a whole load of points as well, so he'll almost certainly go past him. It would be a pretty serious, given that he got to the semis of Wimbledon and got squat all for that, bar a nice big check, it would be a pretty big boost for him to make that, yes, George.
And the other elephant in the room, I suppose, is we're still not 100% sure where Rafa is physically. And I tell you what, if Rafa doesn't come through that section, Norrie's going to the semi-finals, because the rest of that section is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, but
Nadal is going to win this tournament. I'm fairly certain.
It's a typically excellent draw for Rafa Nadal. As you know, the way the Grand Slam draw systems work, they are designed to be good for very highly ranked seeds, but The seeds in his section are Kecmanovic, who wouldn't have been a seed, well, he wasn't a seed until Thursday morning. Francis Tiafoe, who is a fine player, but he is who he is, and Diego Schwartzman. Which, I mean, does Diego Schwartzman not have like a historically terrible record against Nadal in terms of head-to-head? Because he's basically just like a much worse version of him. Oh, that's right, he beat him in Rome in 2020, and it was the first time in like 10 meetings that he'd won. But then he did get battered at Roland Garros in 4 sets last year. Anyway, yeah.
Nadal's sorry, James. Nadal just batters anybody who's small. It's basically impossible to play him because you're hitting every ball above your shoulders.
Yeah, that does make sense.
He's got an absolute dream draw, Nadal, which is just so predictable now. Djokovic is out. Like, there's just no way he's not winning this tournament. It's already written in.
Are we looking at another one of those? Are we looking at another one of those Nadal US Opens where
100%
wins it?
Medvedev will lose to Kyrgios or something. It'll be Nadal versus Carreno Buster in the final.
Nadal, like Tommy Paul in the final or something like that.
So we've cracked through the men's draw in record time. We're now going to crack through the women's draw as well, which it won't surprise you when I tell you is wide open, as per usual. They might as well not bother with seedings in the women's draw, quite frankly, at the moment. It's completely batshit, but well, there's already an absolute cracker of a first round, to be quite frank. We'll start at the top, why not? So this is the top half of the women's draw, which is going to be taking place on Tuesday. The bottom half of the women's draw is on Monday, which means Serena Williams will play, we think, Monday night or overnight Monday in the UK. Iga Świątek leads the draw as the number 1 seed, the world number 1, and the top seed, albeit perhaps not the form player coming in. She's got Jasmine Paolini in the first round and maybe Sloane Stephens in the second. George, I think the pick of the round is in this section, and it's, and I apologise for mispronouncing this, Zhen Xin Wen against Yelena Ostapenko, which I think is just the match of the first round by a mile.
Yeah, it'll be a good match. Two very good players. Ostapenko can always make a match very fiery and add that extra element to it as well. So, yeah, it'll be good to watch. It is an interesting little section, isn't it, really? With Świątek not quite where she was earlier in the year. I think Anisimova is a player you don't really want to run into this year. She's kicking around in there. I think that'd be third round potentially for Ostapenko / Zhang. Sloane Stephens is one that is just so hard to predict who you're going to get. If Świątek plays top-notch Sloane Stephens, she's definitely vulnerable to losing that match. I suspect she might not. But yeah, you still have to pick Świątek to come through this section, but it's by no means a foregone conclusion. I think, yeah, could potentially be a few banana skins in there.
Iga Świątek's form has been far from perfect, perfect is the right word, because there was a period this year when she was perfect. She lost to Caroline Garcia in Poland, which you know is not a terrible result, but then in Canada she lost to Beatrice Haddad-Maia, who's playing very well, and then Madison Keys beat her in Cincinnati in her last match before the US Open. Calvin, does it concern you at all that Iga Świątek actually started losing matches, or is this just what happens sometimes in tennis? People lose matches.
Yeah, I think so. It's that time of the year where that sort of thing starts happening as well. I'm less sure that she's going to win the US Open, but I'm still sure that she is.
Right, okay.
I think that's the best way of putting it.
Yeah, which seems reasonable. I think most people would agree with that as well. Yeah, an interesting draw, some interesting names, but equally you never like to say, well, she'll play her in the fourth round, because the chances of it actually happening seem so slim with so many coin flips around.
And look at last year's tournament. Although Raducanu won it, but just the whole draw was just absolute chaos.
Yeah, correct. In some ways, the most surprising thing to happen in this women's draw would be a really predictable one. That would be by far the biggest shock if we had 6 of the top 8 seeds in the quarterfinals. On to section 2, where we've got Garbiñe Muguruza, Petra Kvitova, Elise Mertens and Jessica Pegula. Pretty much all the lowest ranked they could be for their various lines, apart from Muguruza. Muguruza's got Towson in the first round, which I picked out as a potentially entertaining match because they basically both whack it. George, have you got a good idea of who comes out of this? I mean, JPEG's playing very well.
I think I say Towson at the minute.
I meant the section. I meant the section.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, I think Towson will win that. I think Pegula's having a really good year.
I think she's third in the race.
Yeah, Kvitova's shown signs last week, but no, I think Pegula, and I think Pegula can beat Swiatek as well in the quarterfinals should it come there. I think she's playing really good stuff, suits the US hard courts better than Swiatek does. So I don't fancy Swiatek to win this tournament at all, which seems absolutely mental to say like 2 months ago, but I just don't think she's there at the minute, and I think there's real banana skins. I wouldn't be surprised if she lost to Anisimova. I think Pegula can beat her. So
let's move on
against Calvin there.
Let's move on to section 3. Speaking of people who aren't really there, Paula Badosa is. I mean, Garbiñe Muguruza's having a horrible year as well. We know that, but Paula Badosa hasn't always been at her best in 2022. Maybe because she's got the Netflix cameras trailing around after her. I don't know, but she is on a 3-match losing streak coming into the US Open, including one against Ayla Tomljanovic in Cincinnati, where she won the first set in a tiebreak and then only won 2 more games. George, you're shaking your head rather miserably.
I'm shaking my head at this whole section because I literally couldn't pick who's coming through this.
The seeded players are Badosa, Azarenka, Karolina Pliskova, and Belinda Bencic. I mean, I'm even struggling for like Magda Linette might come out of this.
Kostyuk, possibly.
I suppose so. Marta Kostyuk seems like she's got a lot going on in her mind at the moment, which is completely understandable. Incidentally, I don't think that's unreasonable. But
this actually, I tell you who definitely could come out of this is Sorana Cirstea. This is very like Cirstea territory of everyone in this section is not playing that well. I mean, to be fair, Bencic does have a pretty decent record at the US Open in terms of getting to quarters and semis, so I probably would still pick her. If Azarenka was in any sort of form, she would fly through this section, but she was dreadful against Raducanu the other week, and there's been a bit of humdrum around the match for peace, etc. So I'm not sure where she's at exactly either at the minute.
I think kind of the issue with predicting the women's is that, with the possible exception of maybe 1 or 2 players at the top end and 7 or 8 at the bottom end, you'd give any of the other 100 players in the draw about 50-50 against any of the other 100 players in the draw, seeded or not, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think most matches are just 50-50 matches, and it's nothing really to do with matchups or form or anything. You just pick any 2 players and they'd be close to 50-50. And that's why you get so many shocks.
Yeah, there's a lot of coin tosses, and coin toss is famously difficult to predict.
Yeah.
Speaking of coin tosses, I think Emma Raducanu's first round match is a bit of a coin toss, and I think of the 90 odd players she could have drawn in the first round, I think this is one of the worst. She's got Alizé Cornet in the first round, who admittedly doesn't necessarily have the power to blow Raducanu away, but she will ask some pretty serious questions. Very simply, George, how confident are we that Raducanu gets through this match against Cornet?
Not very. Cornet's had a pretty decent year at the Slams. Obviously upset Swiatek at Wimbledon. She had a good run at the French. Lot of experience. Tricky customer. Yeah, I mean, there were signs last week or so from Raducanu that she could potentially mount a decent run, but I don't know. As you say, I think this is a really, really awkward draw. I'm not sure exactly what Cornet's ranking is at the minute, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Wimbledon run would have made her seeded potentially. So that's a pretty tough draw from that perspective. I mean, just talking about a potential run beyond that. I mean, Taylor Townsend's a tricky player if you face her. So round 2, so Siniakova, and one of Naomi Osaka or Danielle Collins round 3 wouldn't be that ideal either for Raducanu. So I think she'll do very well to reach the fourth round in that section, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was a round 1 exit.
And fourth round, she then gets Wimbledon champion Elena Rybakina, so it gets better. Calvin, Alizé Cornet, she's 37 in the world, by the way, so she would have been seeded had she got points at Wimbledon. But do you share George's pessimism about this?
I don't know if it's pessimism. I'd say again, it's 50-50. That's where I am on it. I just think it's a 50-50 match. I'd struggle to pick it either way. It wouldn't surprise me if either one of them won it. Which, to be fair, is kind of about right. Like you say, Cornet should be seeded. If you take out 1 3-week period a year ago, then Raducanu would probably, she'd be maybe 50, 60 in the world.
Yeah. Would you give her any hope against Osaka if we did get that round 3 match?
If Osaka gets there, Osaka will beat her.
Because she'll be 3 wins.
She'll have had 2 matches under her belt. Yeah. And she did absolutely destroy Danielle Collins earlier this year, didn't she? Was it the one she made the final? Miami, maybe?
Loading.
Osaka, I mean, not Raducanu.
Loading.
I'm sure I watched Osaka absolutely destroy. Yeah, he has, hasn't he?
I'm still here, I promise.
Right there. Quarterfinals, 2-1.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it will be Osaka, but I'm not sure it'll be Raducanu. I think she'll beat Taylor Townsend if she plays her. Raducanu will. But
you've got to be picking. You've got to be picking Osaka for fantasy, don't you? Unseeded.
No.
She's nailed on, isn't she?
2-time winner.
You've got Andreescu unseeded as well, though, who we may well come on to, but yeah, you've got to be backing her.
Right, let's move on to the bottom half of the women's draw, which is the one that we'll see first, funnily enough, because they are on Monday. We'll start with the top section of it. Simona Halep, Jill Teichmann, Madison Keys, Coco Gauff are the seeded players. A few other interesting names in there. Zhang Shui, for example, who's got Teichmann in the first round. I suppose Camilla Giorgi is always an interesting watch one way or another. Coco Gauff is on lots of posters here, George. I've already seen her face all over the city. It's obviously big for the tournament that she goes well, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. It'd be a good match with Halep if we got that 4th round. Halep started to find a bit of form. But Gauff's, we've kind of said this a few times, haven't we, really, that Gauff's had what feels like a good year without it being an exceptional year by the standards we think she can get to, but she's still top 5 in the race, or was last time I was checking. This is the one that can turn this into an exceptional year, this tournament. There's no reason why she can't go and win it. But Halep will be, and Keys, to be fair. Keys has found a bit of form.
That's her third round
so
potential, isn't it?
Third round, so that definitely wouldn't be an easy match. But if she can come through this section, she'll be heading into quarterfinals and beyond with a lot of confidence. And yeah, I think she's definitely got as good a chance as anyone to win this tournament.
It's worth pointing out that Coco Gauff has won 1 match at the US Open since 2019, which is quite surprising. It's literally her worst Grand Slam tournament, which I don't know if that surprises anyone else, but it surprised me.
I mean, she lost to Osaka one year, didn't she?
That was when she went to the 3rd round, yeah.
I think she's not always had 3rd round, yeah.
Sevastova and Sloane Stephens are the other people who beat her.
I mean, they're not. She's not lost to anyone who's bad. Let's put it that way. I mean, Sevastova is an absolute nightmare on her day, and she's had good results at the US Open in the past. But yeah, look, she'll want to rectify that. She's going to be a massive star in the US. But you've got to deliver on home turf, and that's often the hardest place to do it. So yeah, big test again, but I don't see why she can't win this tournament.
Let's keep going down the draw. Section 6 is where we find Maria Sakkari, who I was at a drinks thing with last night, and she was looking extremely tall. And I was like, I don't remember Maria Sakkari being this tall. And then I realised she was wearing like 4-inch platform heels, which probably explains why she was looking quite so tall.
Presume it wasn't a one-on-one drinks, James?
No, it was very much a cocktail party with Martina Navratilova and Chrissy Evert, and Isla Tomljanovic,
nice.
and Madison Keys, and Rob Moore. So, all the big names. Maria Sakkari is the number 3 seed.
All the elegant names in tennis.
Well, it was at this place called Town Tennis Club, which is a tennis club on Manhattan Island, and it's amazing. It's just in the middle of a load of tower blocks, and there's 6 green clay tennis courts. It's very strange. It's also incredibly elite, as you can imagine. There weren't a lot of young people there, put it that way. In Sakkari's section, we've got Alison Risk-Armitage, Caroline Garcia, and Beatrice Haddad-Maia. I mean, if we get Garcia against Haddad-Maia, that is, in a third-round match of real high form, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Andreescu will fancy her chances coming out this section, I still think. But probably looking at Garcia, maybe. It sounds weird to say Garcia's the favourite, I suppose, but Sakkari's not really done it this year, has she, to be honest? So, yeah, I think Garcia's got a good chance, but I'd like to see Andreescu come through this section.
Calvin, we always hear from tennis players that they don't look at the draw, that they don't wonder who they might get in the 3rd or 4th round. Is it a universal truth, or is it mostly bollocks?
I know a lot of people who don't look at the draw. I know a few who do. I think it's just personal preference.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you probably tend to look at the draw if you're at one of the extremes of form. If you're in really good form, you'd have a look at it and think, like, what's my route to the title looking like here? And if you're in really bad form, you're probably looking at, right, have I got any chance of getting anything here? But in between, I think they probably just, in the main, they probably just don't look.
Fair enough. Right, well, we obviously obsess about it much more than players, which is true of almost everything, I find. We've got 2 more sections of women's draw to go, and I've got a bus to catch in about 10 minutes, so we're up against the clock. Ons Jabeur, Shelby Rogers, Veronika Kudermetova, and Daria Kasatkina. Kasatkina is playing Harriet Dart in the first round. Georgia, there's a couple of unseeded players in here who might be of interest as well, like Zidansek once upon a time, Sarah Sorribes Tormo again once upon a time. Any thoughts on who you might have coming out of here?
I mean, you'd hope Jabeur for the sake of the tournament, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kasatkina has actually not had a bad year either. I'd say probably one of those two are the ones you want coming through. Apart from, obviously, Harriet Dart to charge to the US Open quarterfinals would be great, if somewhat unlikely, perhaps. Wouldn't be surprised to see Shelby Rogers do it, though, if I was picking someone that, wouldn't necessarily be the go-to favourite. Yeah, so probably one of those 3. But Jabeur should, on paper, do it, but that normally means they won't.
Yeah, quite. I mean, I think my internet might be doing funny things here, but I will soldier on. Calvin, Ons Jabeur's game on these American hard courts, I mean, what do we make of it? For example, Ash Barty's coach always said she couldn't play or couldn't win the US Open. Ons Jabeur's game is not dissimilar.
Yeah, but, they're both good players. I didn't entirely agree with what Ashley Barty's coach said about that. Good players the balls are only going to make. They might make a 2 or 3% difference, but nothing more than that. I'd find it hard to believe that would cost Jabeur. I think what would be more of a concern for Jabeur is that what happened at Wimbledon, where I think everyone expected a lot better at the end, and it just didn't happen. And whether there's any hangover from that.
Yeah, it must leave scars. Those kind of performances.
I would think so.
Would. Yeah. Yes, Harriet Dart, as you mentioned, the other Brit in the main draw, up against Daria Kasatkina. I mean, it's not a bad opportunity for her. She's having a good year. I think she's having a career year, up inside the top 100 for the first time, for example. And I think she was actually briefly ahead of Raducanu in the race, even until about 3 weeks ago, which is quite remarkable. Into the bottom section, where we find the 2021 finalist Leylah Fernandez, and a whole world of letters after names. Letters like Q for qualifier, LL for lucky loser, and PR for protected ranking. including one Serena Williams, up against Danka Kovinic in the first round. She'll play either Christian or Kontaveit in the second round. Kontaveit, I should say, in the second round. George, I sort of went into this thinking Serena Williams is going to lose first round to no matter who she plays.
Yeah, I think it's an okay draw. I still think any kind of self-respecting top 100 player should be able to win that at the minute. And I'm not being rude. I just don't think she's anywhere near where she should be, or has been in the past. I think it's a great opportunity to beat Serena. If you're not going to beat her now, you're never going to beat her, sort of situation. That said, it's definitely a chance. And if she goes to round 2, Kontaveit's really not setting the houses on fire this year. It's another really open section. I mean, Fernandez obviously went to the final here last year. Krejcikova's had form. Makova is someone I really like, but she's barely been fit. She's been pulling out of tournaments in the build-up to this with injury, so don't know how well she'll do. I've got a bit of a feeling Tomljanovic might be one of the fourth round players. Tomljanovic and Fernandez, I think, would probably be my guess for the fourth round in this section, which, on paper doesn't sound overly strong or exciting. But, if Serena Williams is 50% fit of what she was 3 years ago, she can still come out of this section, to be perfectly honest. But she's probably not. She's probably about 10%. So probably won't.
Calvin, any disagreements with that Serena Williams damning verdict from George?
No. I thought she's looked terrible in the 2 matches that she's played. So I think anybody, I wouldn't expect her to get through the first round, even certainly not 2 rounds. It's going to be interesting to see what Fernandez does. It's amazing, really, isn't it, when you think what happened last year and neither Raducanu or Fernandez have remotely kicked on from making the final. You'd think at least one of them would have gone on to really cement themselves into a top 10 position. But, I mean, there's even an argument do we think Fernandez has done worse than Raducanu?
She's had a better run at, was it the French that she got to?
She's had a big injury as well. A reasonable sized injury. Yeah. She had that foot injury.
She won a title.
She won a title.
Yeah. No, fair point.
I think she has done better, to be fair, but it's not been. Yeah, I mean, considering we were really portraying. Well, I say we. People were really portraying last year's final as final of the future to huge major champions, which they still could be. Don't get me wrong, but it's not quite panning out that way, and. Yeah, we'll see. I'd say Fernandez is far more likely to reach the second week than Raducanu, though.
Yeah, agreed. Fernandez, incidentally, is 28th in the race, and Raducanu is 60th, which I think tells you who's done better since the US Open final. That is mostly all we've got time for. A couple of quick hits. You may have noticed a stink over the match for Ukraine, which is a load of exhibition matches held here in New York on Wednesday night, I believe. Victoria Azarenka was down to play, but she was then removed from it after some criticism from the likes of Marta Kostyuk, because she's obviously Belarusian and the Belarusian involvement in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So Azarenka was pulled out. I don't think there was much bad blood on Azarenka's part. I think she gets it. And I think it's understandable, to be fair. Some better news. Angelique Kerber has pulled out the US Open because she's pregnant. Congratulations to her. Not a huge effect on the draw, I suppose, but she said it would have been unfair to be 2 against 1, which I thought was quite a fun way of putting it. And also, Forbes have released their list of the highest paid tennis players in the last 12 months. Atop it, Roger Federer with $90 million. A distant second, Naomi Osaka on 56. Serena 35. I think the most surprising one for me was Daniil Medvedev at 19 million. I mean, I know he's world number 1, but I do feel like he's struggling a bit for the old image at the moment, given that, well, he's Russian for a start and therefore can't earn certain places and certain monies. But yeah, and then Kei Nishikori at number 8, 13 million. Proof of how big the Japanese market is, if you can crack it. Any final words for us before the US Open kicks off, George?
Nothing particular. I hope you enjoy it, James. It's a fun tournament to do.
I shall do my best. I'm already quite tired, and I woke up once an hour every hour last night, so the jet lag is really kicking in. But yeah, I'll do my best, and I will do my best for you listeners, to provide podlets most days. I'm not going to say every day because I'm here for the first time and I don't know exactly how it's all going to work out. But I'll do my best. The fantasy tennis game will be live in a matter of about 6 hours. Once the last qualifier has been placed, then the game will go live. You've got until Monday, 4 p.m. BST to enter. The link will be on our Twitter. I'll put it in the show description as well. You can enter as many times as you like. It's for fun. It's free. It's for pride. Or in my case, since I have none left after Wimbledon, it's just because it's my job. Thanks very much for listening as always. Please do leave us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts, and most importantly, make sure you come back next week and more often.
Sports Social Podcast Network.